This is a great Yu-Gi-Oh format. And I know some people are gonna be like, oh, but you still on VFD, oh, Vanity's Ruler Go Burr, whatever the case may be. But realistically, you can play a ton of different decks and get away with results. I'll explain more as to why this format is great in my opinion right after this introduction. But today, I'll be discussing why, in my opinion, this is a great Yu-Gi-Oh format. But before we begin, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more content like this one. Make sure to turn on that notification bell to stay up to date with future videos, and make sure to follow my Twitter. I post sometime. But yeah, without further ado, let's get right into this. So to begin, let me give a bottom line as to why I think this is a great format. It's because not only are multiple decks, including road decks, options to be potent in this format, and I'll explain more on that later, but also every deck additionally has ways they can be countered effectively. This is very different and refreshing from the past few formats as well, where you either have to draw two hand traps against Dragon Link and Infernoble and pray, or you lose versus these degenerate strategies. So let me break this down a little more. So obviously last format we'd have to deal with Link Ross shenanigans that get you into two insane win conditions, being both Dragon Buster Destruction Sword and Smoke Grenade of the Thief. These two cards were really meta breaking because it was so hard to effectively counter both strategies. And especially with the hand traps currently in the game, there is no effective countermeasure to punish both of these decks, because both decks also played around two cards, Forbidden Droplets and Dark Ruler No More, two cards that are usually seen to be really effective against combo decks. Well, they just weren't that effective against these two in particular. Hand ripping was unfair. It was just so hard to break these boards that it wasn't realistic to even draw two hand traps, because that would just make your deck building a lot worse, because you'd have to mitigate your consistency immensely. So there weren't any decks that could compensate with a ton of hand traps. The format just became this really awkward thing where you have to either draw two hand traps or you lose. So now we're in a format, however, where all the decks currently in the metagame have their counters. For example, let's talk about the heart of this format being, at first it was just Calamities, but now with the introduction of Drytron, you also have Vanity's Ruler at the heart of this format. You either build to play these cards or you build to beat them. That's essentially the concept with this format, and fortunately for us, it's a lot easier to counter Calamities and Vanity's Ruler effectively than you may think, just because trap cards are such a great counter to them, especially Calamities. What makes these central cornerstones unique, however, is unlike Destruction Sword and Smoke Grenade plus multiple negates, like I said earlier, these are more effectively counterable, but additionally the strategies themselves are a lot more beatable. Instead of the two decks doing the same thing every single game and playing through all the hand traps in the world, now you have decks that are a lot less linear and a lot more, I would say, unique, in the sense that they can be countered with hand traps. Sometimes they can play through them, but generally speaking, it's a lot more consistently beatable than in the past. One hand trap can actually stop these decks, which is really exciting to see. So let's first discuss like the quote-unquote best deck. I think as the format progresses, we're gonna start realizing that Drytron is the best deck. But first, let's discuss Virtual World. Virtual World essentially is the Calamity Burr style of deck this format, where you can use your Virtual World cards and gain massive follow-ups in the process, drawing numerous cards off of Crocosaur and Stardust Charge and Coral Dragon, while also setting up a ton of follow-ups with Gigi and Shen, and finally ending on Calamities plus Chuche, a very hard combination to deal with. However, this is still counterable 100%. Trap cards are really insane against Virtual World. Because you need to control a Virtual World card on the field, it's really hard sometimes for Virtual World to be able to play the game by playing through a ton of back row. And we're gonna see that back row inherently counters Calamities, because Calamities only stops monsters. The deck is still very strong in its own right, and I think if you're comparing Drytron and Virtual World, the biggest difference is Drytron is a deck that has more counterplay, whereas Virtual World doesn't lose to as much of the weird stuff. I'm gonna call it weird stuff, but only because of like Kinglong and Chuche. Kinglong and Chuche out cards that Drytron doesn't have effective outs to, for example, Shadal Winda and Mystic Mine. So I guess the best way to put it is Virtual World is more resilient overall. Before we continue, if you want to buy any cards in the market, make sure to go to TCGPlayer.com. It's easily the most trusted and most effective card market on the internet, and if you want to support me in the process, make sure to use my affiliate link down below. Thank you so much, TCG Player, for being an affiliate of the channel, and with that, let's continue. Next, let's talk about Drytron. So Drytron is the other combo deck of the format, and like I said, it's a very similar situation to Virtual World, while being more aggressive in its resources because of the way Drytron functions. It's more of a combo deck over like a mid-range strategy. Instead of Calamity's Go Burr, Vanity's Ruler Go Burr is the game plan, plus you get so many follow-ups in the process. What's crazy about the Drytron cards is, sure, Vanity's Ruler can be added by trap cards, but what's different than Virtual World is you're getting so many follow-ups because your Drytron names don't banish themselves, a unique factor to Drytron over many other decks of the past. Drytron not having their resources get banished is one of the biggest reasons this deck can thrive, because of the fact your Drytron's names just keep sitting in your graveyard for future turns. And while eventually I do think this card will get banned just because Drytron will be here as long as that card is legal, and eventually us Yu-Gi-Oh players are going to get tired of Drytron, I think right now it's a very healthy meta combo deck, especially compared to before, because it doesn't do the exact same thing every single game. Because if you don't draw Ben 10, for example, then you just ash the Drytron Alpha that searches the Ben 10, and you're in a lot more of an awkward game state. If you do draw Ben 10, then you're going to have more rough time, but then additionally, there's also a skill cap to Drytron. If you're not a good Drytron pilot, you're gonna get punished, and so you have to be good with the deck in order to really take advantage of this powerful strat. So in general, you also have an alternate win condition over Vanity's Ruler, being Herald of Ultimateness, which I don't think is as good as Ruler, because the comparison I usually give is Vanity's Ruler is a win condition that doesn't require discard versus a win condition like Herald of Ultimateness that does require discards. So yeah, you also have like a ton of different versatile options in the form of the Herald monsters in hand, like Herald of Orange Light and Herald of Purple Light are really strong cards, and in general, this deck is definitely a menace moving forward. Finally, however, we have so many control and rogue options, and I think that's what makes this format so great. While you do have the two really strong combo decks, if it were just those two combo decks, and if they weren't unbeatable, then it's like, then the format's just horrible. But because there are so many other decks and options you can play, I think that makes this format so much better. So some of the options include Eldritch, Zodiac, Dogmatica, Dino, Altergeist, Invoked, Shaddoll, and so much more. I think there are a ton of different decks that can thrive in a format like this, and if you find your unique aspect that puts you over the edge, you're going to have a good time in a tournament. These decks, while not being as powerful as the aforementioned top two decks, are all capable of beating the top decks due to different ways of having counterplay. And whether you play these other options because you don't want to play mirror matches or simply have fun, what's refreshing is they can all have a good chance to win against combo going second. And all in all, let's talk about this year as a whole and moving forward. 2020 is behind us, with it being both the weirdest year in arguably our lifetime, and the strangest year for Yu-Gi-Oh as a whole. However, with this year being over comes the chance of a much better 2021. And if we're just talking about YGO currently, given the state of the Yu-Gi-Oh format right now and the future products, I'm excited to see what Yu-Gi-Oh has in store for us moving forward. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome to 2021. If you want to learn even more about Drytron, make sure to click on an end screen in front of you. Thank you so much, and with that, I hope to see you soon.